Deva Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Hare Krishna, good morning. So today we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavat Purana. We are reading from the 4th skanda, chapter Chapter 4, text 2 or 3? 3. Text number 3. So please repeat after me, word by word. Tato Vinishvasya Sati Vihayam Tang Shokena roshena cha duyata hridam pitror agat strainam vimudha dhir grihan premnatmano yo ardham adat satam priyaham. Now we're line by line. Tato vinishvasya sati vihayatam shoke naroshena chaduyata hridam shoke naroshena chaduyata hridam pitro ragatstraina vimudadhir grihan premnatmano yordham adat satam priyaham. Ladies, zu spät. Shvasya sati vihayatam shoke naroshena cha dukhaya hrida pitro ragatstraina vimudhadir grihan premnatmano yoridam adat satam priyaha. Anybody else would try? It's a little bit difficult one today. Tato vinishvasya sati vihayatam shoke naroshena chaduyata hridam pitro ragatstraina vimudhadir grihan premnatmano yordham adat satam priyaha. Thank you very much. Word by word. Tataham. Then. Vinishvasya. Breathing very heavily. Sati. Sati. Vihayam. Leaving. Tam. Him. Lord Shiva. Shokena. By bereavement. Roshena. By anger, cha, and duyata, afflicted, hrida, with the heart, pitroho, of her father, agat, she went, straina, by her womanly nature, vimudha, deluded, dihi, intelligence, grihan, to the house, premna, due to affection, atmanaha, of his body, yaha, who, ardham, half, adat, gave, satam, to the saintly, Priyaha, dear. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. God bless. So, translation. Thereafter, Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half his body due to affection. Breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. Purport. According to Vedic conception of family life, the husband gives half his body to his wife, and the wife gives half of her body to her husband. In other words, a husband without a wife or a wife without a husband is incomplete. Vedic marital relationship existed between Lord Shiva and Sati, but sometimes, due to weakness, a woman becomes very much attracted by the members of her father's house, and this happened to Sati. In this verse, it is specifically mentioned that she wanted to leave such a great husband as Shiva because of her womanly weakness. In other words, womanly weakness exists even in the relationship between husband and wife. Generally, separation between husband and wife is due to womanly behavior. Divorce takes place due to womanly weakness. The best course for a woman is to abide by the orders of her husband. That makes family life very peaceful. Sometimes there may be misunderstandings between husband and wife, as found even in such an elevated family relationship as that of Sati and Lord Shiva, but a wife should not leave her husband's protection because of such a misunderstanding. If she does so, it is understood to be due to her womanly weakness. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyanangyana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namostute Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll read once again the verse. Tato vinishvasya sati vihayatam shoke naroshena chaduyata hrida pitro ragatstraina vimuda dhirgrihan prematmano yordham adat satam priyaha. Thereafter, Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half his body due to affection. Breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. So we're reading in a very interesting section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 4th canto, where we have the story of Daksha, Lord Shiva, and Sati. So some of you might be acquainted with this story, and it's a very it's a lot of things are happening there. There's cursing, counter cursing. There's family relationships, and there's big battles. A lot of destruction. People get killed, and a lot of things happen. So it's a complete story, you could say. Everything is there. There's love. There's drama, there is war, but the point which we have reached right now is after Lord Shiva and Parvati had a conversation. So Lord Shiva and Parvati had quite long conversation, and during this conversation, Sati was expressing her desire to go visit her father. And the reason was because she could see that many people were going there. There were many people, it's even explained, there are many vimanas, many planes and different devatas. Everybody was going to this big ceremony her father was holding. But Shiva advised her against going there. So the question is why? Why is Shiva advising her against going there? And the reason is because the previous episode of this story was that Daksha apparently already on the onset of this episode had some disdain or less respect for Lord Shiva. He was not fully in appreciation of Lord Shiva, even he was his son-in-law. So Lord Shiva had married his daughter, and he was not so pleased. Because externally, Lord Shiva was a mendicant, a sadhu, so he had you could say a shocking appearance. Lord Shiva is actually golden by color, but he covers his entire body with the ashes of the crematorium. So why would you do that? And he also takes the skulls from the crematorium and he makes a garland. And he's wearing this garland of skulls, and his body is covered in the ashes of the crematorium. So this is very shocking. And it's still in India. There is the Aghori Babas. If you go to Varanasi, there are Aghori Babas, who are imitating Shiva, which is not a good idea, because Shiva cannot be imitated. But they're imitating Shiva in a very similar way. And the idea behind these activities is to make a very clear statement what the nature of this world is. So Shiva is Mahadeva. He is the greatest among the demigods, and he is also Mahadeva means he's the Lord of this world. So Lord Shiva, even he is the most powerful personality in this world, and thereby also has all opulences actually. Shiva is very opulent actually. If you read the description in the Bhagavatam, which is a little bit later, a few chapters further down, we will read about the description of Kailash. Kailash Dham is the place where Lord Shiva resides, and it's full of opulence, extreme opulence, much more opulent than anything you will find in this material world. But within Mount Kailash, Shiva is very ascetic. He's living very simply. He's not putting any jewelry or crowns or fancy silks, or he is living very, very simply, because Lord Shiva wants to confront us with the reality that actually this world is a place of temporary nature. And the best way to become aware of temporary nature is to look into a skull. Then you will remember that your beautiful face, that now you put some cream and you shave and you put some kajal and decorate it, this beautiful face will die, and the only thing that will remain will be a skull. So it's a reality. And I always tell this story, but for me it was a very interesting realization when I was a young brahmachari in Berlin. We had a very nice temple, small temple, but very nice in the middle of the city. And you could climb up the stairs and climb to the roof. And we often would go there to chant. So if the temple was too crowded, we just climbed to the roof, and we were sitting on the roof of the city. And we could look at the whole city and chant japa there. And I was chanting japa. And I was getting tired, so I was supporting my head with one hand. And suddenly I started feeling my skull. Like, oh no. I realized I will die, and this is my skull here, I could see this is the cavity of my eyes, and it was a very sobering but very, very, very good realization, we will all die. The only thing that will remain from this body will be a skeleton. So the Aghori Babas following Shiva, they have some philosophical, they have a very clear, you could say, philosophical understanding in rejecting this world for its temporary nature. Since everything is temporary, why should we become so much entangled in it? Why should we try to endeavor to, accumulate so many things, honor or reputation or status in society or money, whatever it might be, property, conquering lands, whatever it might be. Why should we do this if anyways, certainly everything is temporary? Because we will have to, we come with nothing to this world and we will leave with nothing. So that's what Shiva exemplifies. Even he's the most powerful and the most opulent, he decides to live very simply. So by choice, this is by choice. It's very different than, nowadays, of course, in India, Kali Yuga is there, and there are many so-called sadhus that out of necessity become sadhus and beg, So that, of course, is not the same thing. But in India also you will find many, many stories in recent times, big bankers, big businessmen, also in the past kings, who by choice decided, because they understood what the real meaning of life is, they renounced everything and they decided to live very, very simply. And that is what Shiva is exemplifying. He was externally, directly confronting everybody with death, with a garland of skulls and smeared with ashes of a crematorium. Shiva is always pure. He never becomes impure. Unlike we, if we imitate Lord Shiva, we will become impure. We cannot imitate Lord Shiva. So some Aghori Babas, they imitate Lord Shiva and they drink alcohol and they, do all kinds of nasty things in the name of following Shiva, but that's not the idea. Shiva is transcendental and he's confronting everybody with the nature of this world that is death. So Daksha could not appreciate this. Daksha would have preferred a son-in-law who had a very good business and had a lot of money externally, visible also for everybody in society to also respect, that now his daughter has married this very nice boy. But maybe somebody was wondering, this nice princess, Sati, such an amazing, girl, and now she's married to this, weird guy, he's having matted locks, he and he has serpents around his body, very strange, societally wise, maybe a little bit, how you say, not so appreciable for everybody. So that was Daksha's problem. Daksha could not appreciate Lord Shiva in his spiritual nature and was completely confused by his external appearance. So he was not happy that he had married his daughter in the first place. And then it occurred that during a big assembly, when Daksha entered this assembly, everybody rose in respect of Daksha. Daksha, after all, is a Prajapati. He's a patriarch, a progenitor, one who's populating the universe. Very, very important position given by Brahma. And he was proud of his position. And he thought of Shiva as his son-in-law. So he expected the minimum, he was tolerating this wedding, but now Shiva was so absorbed in meditation, he didn't even notice that Daksha had entered the room. So Shiva did not stand up, and did not give him honor. So family-wise, he should have, family-wise, he should have given respect. Like there's this very famous story also of Bhrigu Muni, you might have heard. Bhrigu Muni and many of the sages, they had this question, who of the three guna avatars is supreme? Mahesha, Brahma, or Vishnu? So these three murti, they are in charge of the three gunas in this material world, and the sages were discussing who is supreme among them three. And they were discussing many different ways, but they couldn't find the final conclusion. So Bhrigu Muni volunteered to find out. So he volunteered to find out who is supreme. So Bhrigu is a sage, and he's actually one of the sons of Brahma. So he first went to Brahma. Shishi Prahlad Lakshmana Singari Bhagwan ki jai. Jai. So Bhrigu Muni went to Brahma, and Brahma is his father. And even Brahma is his father, Bhrigu entered in the presence of his father and did not pay proper respect. He's like, hello, Brahma, how are you doing? So Brahma was offended. It's my son, how is he behaving? How did I raise you? Did I teach you so bad behavior? So Brahma was not very pleased at all, and he became very agitated, that his son was not paying him proper respect. So Bhrigu could understand he's not supreme. He's getting agitated, by one small, disrespect, I have given to him. So he, offered his apologies and left. And then he went to meet Lord Shiva, who is his brother, So they're kind of equal, So they saw each other. So she was like, hey, Bhrigu, and wanted to embrace him. He was like, hey, don't embrace me, I'm Suchi, I'm clean. Look at you, full of ashes, dirty skulls, don't touch me. So Lord Shiva was like, hey, what's wrong with you? He also became agitated. We're brothers, what are you talking about? So Shiva became very angry also, and again Bhrigu excused himself and continued. And then he went into the 1,000-pillar hall where Lord Vishnu was resting. And he approached Vishnu, who was resting, and kicked him. So it's the first offense was actually very minor. It was just by gesture. The second offense was by words. And the third offense he committed against Vishnu was the highest. He physically kicked Lord Vishnu, in the chest. And Lord Vishnu still bears this mark, actually. Many deities, like the deity of Lord Jagannath, for example, has the foot of Bhrigu, still always, depicted on the chest of Vishnu. So how did Vishnu react? He woke up from his slumber and he said, oh, Bhrigu, I hope you didn't hurt your foot with my hard chest. So there was and then Bhrigu clearly understood that only Vishnu was truly, reacting in a completely detached way. So, like that, the external appearance of Shiva, also in this situation, Bhrigu used it, to to find out. And in a similar way, Daksha could not understand the position of Shiva, and when Shiva did not pay him respect, he became very, very angry and started insulting Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva did not, take part in this insulting. He just stood up and left. But the followers of Lord Shiva, they would not take it. So, led by Nandishvara and all the other followers of Lord Shiva, the Shiva Ganas, they started counter-cursing, Bhrigupati and all the, followers of Daksha. So this big cursing and counter-cursing, started taking place. And this is very interesting because many of the things that are, the curses that were spoken there still are considered to have an effect nowadays. For example, the followers of Lord Shiva curse that the Brahmanas in Kali Yuga, they will end up, just pretending to be Brahmanas by birth, but not by qualification. And also the followers of Daksha curse the followers of Shiva that by the worship of Shiva, they will actually get deluded and will become atheistic and satanistic even. So all these curses still have an effect, nowadays. So this tension was in the air, when here, now Sati was talking to Lord Shiva and saying, I want to go to my father's place. And Shiva said, we didn't receive an invitation, so probably we're not welcome. But Sati was, no, you can always go to your father's place. There's no problem. You can always go there. You're always welcome there. It's your family. You can always go. So basically what this verse is saying that, by this affection, prematmano, it says here, by affection, bodily affection, we have this, identification with the family, and strong urge was there for her to go back to her family. Even she probably knew, or was anticipating that everything would not be good, but still she, against the advice of Lord Shiva, she had to go. She had to go. She could not stop it. And what Prabhupada is mentioned here in the beginning of the purport is very interesting, that it says here, according to the Vedic conception of family life, the husband gives half of his body to his wife, and the wife gives half of her body to her husband. So in one sense, they become a unity, a union. And you will see, especially in connection to Lord Shiva and Sati, there are many deities that are depicted like that. You might have seen where Shiva is, a deity which is half Shiva and half Sati. It's a very common, very beautiful deities, especially in South India. You will find very beautiful deities like that. So the idea is that husband and wife become one unit. They become how you say. Ideally, one entity who has one common purpose. And this is very interesting because Srila Prabhupada sometimes in the Bhagavatam, especially in the third canto, there's one section where he talks about how we can become one with God. Because generally, because we are devotees, we follow the Bhagavat philosophy, we don't want to become one with God. We think that we always want to be the servants of God, and to become one with God would be undesirable, or even offensive, or preposterous. How dare you think you could become God? But actually, there is a level where unity is possible. Unity is possible, and Prabhupada explains that we should be one in Krishna in desire. If we desire the same thing like Krishna desires, or if our desires are in tune with Krishna's desires, then we are one, in that sense. And this starts you can practice this by following the instructions of the spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada says. And we sing it every day. We sing every day, Shri Guru Charana Padma, Mukha Padma, Chitete Koriya Aikya. Yes, Chitete Koriya Aikya. So the words emanating from the mouth of the Guru, may my chitta, my consciousness, my being become one with the words of my Guru. So that's the idea. The idea is that if we are completely in tune and in full understanding, in full realization of the instructions of Guru, of Krishna, then we are one. Their unity is possible. We're not one that we dissolve ourselves and we don't exist anymore and we merge like a drop of water merges into the ocean without possible distinction or recognition of which drop entered the ocean. This is the Advaita idea of salvation, that we as entities, as Atmas, the ideal position is to transcend this material body and to dissolve our Atma into the Paramatma, and then everything becomes one. But for a Bhakti Yoga devotee, this is undesirable and actually considered to be worse than hell. Because even in hell, you can have a loving relationship with Krishna. Bali Maharaj is in hell, great devotee. So for a devotee, actually, seva and devotional service and a personal relationship is supreme. So when we become one with Krishna, we become one in desire, but we don't give up our individual personality. We just are completely in tune and pure to be in the association of the Supreme constantly. So what Srila Prabhupada is explaining here is that husband and wife, ideally they are one unit, one unit, and they cooperate. But always it can happen that there is some, discord, in a union. And it's very interesting because Lord Srila Prabhupada is saying, even in such a exalted relationship, Lord Shiva and Sati are no ordinary persons. Sati is Prakriti personified. She is Mother Nature. She is a personification of all the material energy. Sati Devi, Parvati, so many names. So many temples in her honor. Durga, Kali, so many different forms of the Shakti. So she's no ordinary person. But even at that level, there is still a misunderstanding can take place. That's the word Srila Prabhupada is using. Such misunderstanding can even take place, in such a situation. And as you might have heard, so this is of course in our current times. If you read this purport and this verse, it seems that all the blame is on the woman. All the blame is on the woman. And seems unfair. So it seems because of womanly weakness. So in this case, certainly that is true. Shiva is absolutely transcendental, and Sati was showing some weakness. But of course, we know that in other places, Srila Prabhupada is saying that the problem in Kali Yuga is that men are also not very qualified. So if there is a qualified man, who is spiritual and is, trying to, devote his life to spiritual activities and is very disciplined, then a wife can only benefit from following such a husband. And you could say, to a certain extent, any relationship, but especially the relationship of, a marriage relationship, you have to compromise. You have to compromise, and you have to. You cannot just do it your way, because you're now one unit. So half of your life, half of your body, like theoretically speaking, is your wife, and the same way around. So you have to adapt and take their likings, their nature, their whatever it is. You become one unit. Sorry, I wanted to say something. I forgot which direction I was going. Give me 1 second. I hope I remember. Yes, thank you very much. So you have to compromise. So that means that you have to be able to adapt and to serve, and to not expect that everything will go as you want it. And this is a very powerful training, actually, because you have to learn to share. So technically, you could say there's two different ways to achieve detachment. One way to achieve detachment is by knowledge. You have full understanding and clarity of knowledge, and this knowledge translates in you being able to control the senses and detach from this material reality and fully focus, onto the spiritual reality. And the more practical, more common way for us to, achieve detachment or learn, you could say, is pravritti marga. There's nivritti marga and pravritti marga. So those are both, you could say, legitimate paths. One is full of detachment just from the onset because of understanding, and the second one, you endeavor for material, situations, material relationships, family, society, everything, and in the process, you realize you have to give. So when you have children, you have to give. Children are by nature and by their, their quality, they take from you, and you willingly give. So you have to learn to be detached. So it's very important to make a very clear distinction between selfish detachment and true detachment. Because this can also easily happen, that we think, oh no, married life, too much trouble, too much money, I remember when I was a brahmachari, I heard one lecture, and this renunciate was quantifying how much it costs to raise a child, So he was quantifying, how much, it costs, to dress the child, to feed the child, to put it, in Germany it's not so bad with school, but in America, if you want to send a child to college, huge, so much money you need, to raise and educate the child, So he was suggesting, you're brahmachari monks, you don't have to go to this trouble, just stay, you can save all this money and use it for Krishna. So, but this might trigger the wrong motivation actually, this might trigger the wrong motivation, that you only want to, remain renunciate to avoid trouble. So you can actually enjoy better just by yourself. So this is selfish also. True detachment is when you are fully engaging all your energy, all your abilities, talents, time in the service of Krishna. If you're actually not doing that, then maybe it's a good idea to, take responsibility for a family. In other words, we have to take responsibility. We cannot avoid responsibility and have an easy ride. There is no easy ride. Whatever you do, if you remain a brahmachari and detached, you have to take responsibility and you have to fully surrender. And if you can't do that, you have to take responsibility for a family. And there, in many ways, you will be forced to surrender. And very often it's by nature. In ideal situation, you want to, serve and, protect your children and your family. It's by nature. You want to, cook for them and maintain them. And it's, in an ideal situation, it's not really a pain, But it can become a pain, It can be troublesome also, depending what karmas we have, Maybe the economical situation is not so, or the economical problems are not so easily solved, as we would have liked to, or expected. So, there is trouble, there is, difficulties coming along. In the Bhagavatam, there's a prediction also for the age of Kali, that in the age of Kali Yuga, as our current age, if you manage to maintain a family, a house, and children, you're considered to be a hero already. Just by doing that, because it's so difficult in this age. What used to be the norm, the standard, that everybody, just by nature, by design, by society, you would find, your family, and you knew what trade you were doing. Very often the trades were just inherited from your parents. So there was no big dilemma, of managing to maintain a family. But nowadays in Kali Yuga, it's a big endeavor. If you can maintain a family and stay together, for your whole life, people will applaud you. It's like, wow, they're still together after so many years, Incredible. How did they do it, So this is Kali Yuga, it's become upside down. It's the opposite now. And even on top of that, the narrative of whole society has changed also, Before, conservative societies always encouraged family life, the traditional family, the father, the mother, and the children, But nowadays, all of this is put into question, There don't need to be, you can just, a male and a female, they can just come together just to have children, and they live separate apartments, and they share the children, It's quite common nowadays, So the whole idea of this, family units, cooperating, having a sacred space, a dharma, duty to each other, it's vanishing very fast, And it's put into question, the validity, the necessity of the gender roles, the validity of female qualities within a relationship, male qualities within a relationship. They try to homogenize, everything, and so it becomes even more difficult. You don't only have to take care of, having enough money and a commitment to your partner. You also have to justify, why you're doing this, to the rest of society. Because maybe you are, a misogynist and right-wing nationalist just because you want to have a normal family. It has come to that, that following a traditional way of life might be considered to be not politically correct. Why is your wife staying at home and you're working? Should be the way around, or you both should be working. However it might be, everything is put into question, and yes, so it's even more difficult, with our conditioned natures in Kali Yuga, to avoid misunderstandings is not easy. And misunderstandings, anybody who has had a relationship, if it's with your parents or a spouse or whoever it is, it's sometimes incredible. Like once a misunderstanding took place and you afterwards observe, what happened, it's actually incredible. How willing we are to engage into this misunderstanding. Very often the nature of, if you have some ignorance, which lets you forget or not see things very clearly, and some passion, which means you want something, out of the situation or relationship, can very quickly lead you to react in a certain way, search certain things, assume certain things that the person was meaning to say, but the person was actually not meaning to say. So very often, I'm sure everybody has to some extent this experience, that misunderstandings, if you look at them in retrospect, you realize how stupid very often, how stupid and how avoidable it could have been, if you in the first place, would have been a little bit more alert, or you could also say, once when I was in Gurukul, one very valuable teaching I got from one teacher, because I was a little bit, overreacting in some situations. The teacher told me, please think twice. I was like, okay. It's very valuable. It's a very simple wisdom, but when this teacher told me that, it really sinked in. I still remember. Just think twice, before you say something, before you do something, because very often we react on a very sentimental level. Means the mind, the emotions, the feelings, our desires, and the senses, whatever attraction, that's what motivates our immediate reaction. Also the ego can be involved. But if you think twice, usually you are wise enough to react in a different way. And therefore in German, there is this famous saying, der Klügere gibt nach. The one who is more intelligent, he gives in first. In any, conflict or misunderstanding, there's always escalation. So if you want to de-escalate, somebody has to give in, otherwise there's no end to conflict. Like now we have also a very common war going on between Russia and Ukraine. Theoretically, you can just sit down together, let's talk about it. Diplomacy, it could work, but nobody wants to give in first. Nobody wants to be weak. But actually, it's not a sign of weakness; it's a sign of intelligence. If you're able to, swallow your false ego and say, sorry, actually, it was my fault, And then usually if you have a good partnership, the other person will also say, no, actually it was my fault, And then, you were both at fault. That's what was escalating with you, So there is no, usually, there might be some very clear-cut situations, but usually in most of our relationships, we are both at fault, and that's why it's escalating. And if you don't have enough insight and introspection to admit our shortcomings and faults, then it's very difficult to get out. And it can very soon lead to, if you feel so entitled, that only the other person is wrong, then certainly you are wrong. Very sure. Yes, but of course, it's very important to be. You could say because what is being described here is an ideal situation. So the ideal situation is when we have, or any relationship. If you have a real relationship, if you give in first, then that should usually lead to the other person also, making a step towards reconciliation, and finding some peace. But what this does not encourage, and can be misunderstood, it does not encourage abuse, because that's what sometimes people say. No, I'm the husband. You have to follow me, no matter what. So, and that easily it can be misused. Abuse can happen. It's unfortunately very common if we have degraded nature or wrong impressions, samskaras, from our childhood. That all leads to a certain way how we behave and how we interact, in our adulthood. It actually says that the 3 first years of our life are emotionally the most formative years of our life. So whatever happens in the first 3 years of our life, that dictates how we react in emotionally challenging situations. So yes, we have to be aware that if we have such a nature, you should be very conscious. You should be very, even more, cautious about, being careful not to harm others, because this is what easily can happen. That and also it does happen that such an ideal situation is used as an excuse, for misuse in relationships. It happens, but that's certainly not encouraged here. We are the premise here is that we have a qualified husband like Lord Shiva. So unless you are as qualified as Lord Shiva, you should not demand, you could say, absolute and complete surrender of your wife. Probably not a good idea. She might rebel. It happens all the time. Okay, I think I'll stop here. It's 1:45. So if there are some question, comments, criticism, corrections, anything, I'm happy to hear it. Haben wir ein Mikrofon? Or anybody wants to say something? No. Yes.
We can see in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna in the beginning refused to fight. Mm-hmm. And Prabhupada refers to that feelings as sentimentalism. Mm-hmm. Then in one purpose, Prabhupada is glorifying Arjuna, that he is not envious. Yes. And this is humble heart of Vaishnava. Similarly, we have also in Bhagavatam, when Draupadi wanted the revenge because her sons were killed by Ashwatthama. So when finally Ashwatthama was in front of her, she said he is Brahmana and how her mother will feel because he was the only child. And Prabhupada also said this is just woman nature and sentimentalism. But then again, he is glorifying her because she is not envious. And similarly, we have here that Sati wanted to go to Daksha's place, and Prabhupada in this purport refers that this is womanly sentimentalism, basically. But then in another purport, Prabhupada said, actually the main purpose why Sati wanted to go to Daksha is to defend the honor of her husband. And he wanted to convince her father that he should abandon his envious nature toward Shiva. So sometimes it's confusing, such opposing things. How we can reconcile that?
Thank you very much. This is very, very, very good. Thank you very much. Yes, so this is a very good point, because here it says womanly weakness, but that's what I was trying to say. When you give in, you know, the like it's in German, say the one who's wiser gives in first. You know, so this you could say compassionate nature, or this weakness of what could be in this situation a weakness. In many other situations, it's a strength, you know, because the female nature will much more naturally be inclined to devotion and bhakti. You know? The male nature might have some resistance, you know, some you could say ego blockade to actually fully surrender and truly develop bhakti. You know? So this is very often also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, that the female nature is actually a great asset in devotional service. You know? If it's about devotional service and serving and, you know, compassionate, you know, she was not thinking in a very, like say, rational. She was thinking she could still convince her husband. You know, she was idealistic, you could also say. You know, and she was, you know, feeling this natural urge. You know, I should be with my family. You know, this should be natural. You know, and she was, you could say, consciously or unconsciously. Sagt man ausblenden, hiding, or, you know, not taking account of the reality that probably it would go wrong, you know. She was, you know, idealistic enough to take the risk, you could also say, you know. So this is also this is also very powerful, like you're saying in the case of Arjuna especially. There's not so many purports, but like you said, there are some purports. Usually Prabhupada would say, you know, this Arjuna is in ignorance, he doesn't understand his true nature, that's his duty, you know. But in other purports, Srila Prabhupada is glorifying that actually it's the nature of devotee to be compassionate. So naturally, because he's a devotee, he doesn't want to kill. You know? So, yeah, how to reconcile this apparent contradiction or very opposing judgment? Arjuna was very weak, or he was a very, you know, compassionate person. You know? And I think these are two levels of reality. Like on a very on a more external level, Arjuna, you know, a war is about to happen, and you know everybody had prepared for this war, and it was clear that the battle will take place. So to, you know, decide not to fight in the last moment, it's weak, you know. But from a, you know, deeper perspective, Arjuna was by nature compassionate, you know. So he was not like a normal warmonger who's just fighting to have a kingdom, you know. No, Arjuna was detached actually. Arjuna's motivation was much, much higher, much, much deeper, you know. And he was able, you know, to actually question, you know, why should I do this, you know? So this is actually amazing, you know, that he was able to, like anybody in such a situation, you know, before a battle, everybody, it's, I've heard from people who have been in battle, it's like a drug actually, you know. When you're about to fight, you know, and you know you're going to probably maybe die, you know, actually it's very intoxicating, you know. You become, you know, people scream and, you know, and run into battle, you know. Very intoxicating, and you don't care, you know, for any causality. You know? You kill indiscriminately. You have to, you know. It's a battlefield, you know. But Arjuna was much deeper, you know. He was able to, to reflect on this whole situation, the consequences, what will happen if he fights, etc., etc. So, and of course, this is a different situation, but again, there are two sides, and I think I would, focus on this side also. That Sati was like not society, but in general, because we're talking about the female nature. What in this situation might have been a weakness, because she was putting herself in danger, by doing that. At the same time, it was her, immediate emotional urge, to solve the situation. It's not bearable for a woman if there is conflict in the family. It's not an ideal situation, and you could say it's a natural urge, to try to reconciliate both sides. So she was trying to do that. I have to go there. I have to talk. Maybe I can manage, to solve the situation. Even it was dangerous and it didn't work. Is that okay? Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Then I'll end here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.